Hey everyone, welcome to Nico Likes to Talk, a conversation podcast where I do what everyone tells me I've been doing for the last 30 something years, talking. Sometimes about something important, most times about nothing at all. And that's the aim of this podcast. My goal is to talk to every one of my social media followers because I'm curious on getting to know you, whether that's strangers, friends, even family. I'm just here to chat. So if you're interested, shoot me a message and we can set that up. I'm interested in getting to know you, your story, and all the craziness that's behind your social media profiles. Today is solo day. Today is hurricane prep day. Today is ranking every single MCU project day. And this is something that people have been asking my personal opinions about for almost a decade, right? Since the MCU started. And I've always talked in person about this, but a few people have said, you know what? One of your episodes should be ranking the MCU. I'm curious about what you think and what order things go and how you feel the state of the MCU is and all that other stuff. And I'm like, sure, I'm Nico. I'm your humble servant. I can talk about it. No big deal. So I feel like we'll do something like that today. Got some time to kill while I wait for Hurricane, not Helene, Milton to either wash me away or everyone else I know. So let's hope that doesn't happen. But, I figured now's a good day to do that. So I figured let's go ahead and have some fun. Now, what do we have here? I think everyone can see that. Yeah, I know a lot of people have given their rankings, but I kind of like this idea. I've never really sat down and actually ranked all these projects, and I've seen I think 90% of them. So my goal is to rank the ones that I have seen, and it's all the movies and most of the shows. If I haven't seen it, I won't rank it. I'll give my thoughts on what I think it could be, but yeah, I'm excited. A little history about my relationship to Marvel is I've always loved the movies. I mean, before the MCU, I was a huge fan of the first Blade movie, and I'm not really trying to show my cards just yet, but the original Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies are god tier, especially the first two, especially number two. I can do a separate video on my rankings of the every superhero film that I've seen. And, everyone's top five, Dark Knight, Spider Man, to Avengers Endgame, all that. But my tastes are a little different. I am a huge fan of character. I mean, I shouldn't say it's a little different as opposed to everyone else's, but I am not just a shill for spectacle. Like, I need good character growth and conversation. I've read comics, I've watched TV shows, I've played all the different video games. Like, my history with superhero stuff is pretty deep, and quote unquote, before it was cool, but still, it matters. Good storytelling matters, and I'm not here to crap on anyone's movie or vision of what they wanted to do. I'm just going by what the story is. Of course, over the years, I've had my speculations. I'm not really interested in talking too much about who was cast in what movie and why and all that other crap. I'm just here to talk about the story and what I like. Because yes, it does inform the movie when you watch something, and especially when you look at Robert Downey Jr., for instance, like his life backstory informs how we view Tony Stark because it's just like a perfect melding of actor and character. Those rarely happen. Those don't happen all the time. So I don't want it to be the only staple that I pay attention to when it comes to these rankings. So I'm just going to, I'll talk about the plot. I'll just talk about my general thoughts. I'll talk about my thoughts from when I saw the movie and then on various rewatches. I think that does help. And that's what sort of is my barometer, because there's plenty of movies, superhero or otherwise, that when you rewatch it, it still feels like the same time. And then others, it just diminishing returns. And unfortunately, a lot of superhero media has that. Um, I'm not going to sit here and say whose fault that is. It just is what it is. So, we have S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier, E tier, F tier. I don't know if any one of these will be an F tier. F tier is like, god awful. Think about the worst thing you've ever seen, and that's in F tier. But some movies have like such a trashy quality to them that, like a cheesy B movie like Sharknado, right? On the Sci-Fi channel when that first came out, like that was all the rage. Quality wise, it's an F tier movie, but culturally wise, it could be B to S tier just because of how impactful it is and how fun it is to watch it. How it truly is a turn your brain off, don't think about it movie. And once you do that, you'll have a grand time. And some of these, it's kind of like that, but some things about superhero movies, they kind of take themselves so seriously that they kind of lose the point, but also it becomes a comedy joke factory. And I kind of ding some of these Marvel movies on that because they keep a certain tone where it just gets, but all right, that's enough of all the preamble. Of course, you can chat about this and message me, send send me a message, comment. Of course, like, share, subscribe. My content will be on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Again, this is just for fun. I have nothing else to do while I wait for the storm to hit me. So, how do I do this? Do I go in chronological order? Do I go in release order? Do I go in the order they have it? Because it looks like they do have this in release order. So let's just do that. Let's just do that. Okay, first things first. Incredible Hulk, 2008, if I'm correct, with Edward Norton. This one I never did. I see this one in theaters? I don't think I saw this one in theaters. I think I saw it on TV. I can't remember, but I think I've watched it twice since then. And does it hold up? It's an interesting character study. It borrows from the TV show, not so much that Ang Lee version, which has its moments, the Ang Lee version of Hulk. But with this one, I don't think Hulk, how should I say this? I think Hulk has been more terrifying, is more terrifying in this first movie than he was in the subsequent other films, maybe in the first Avengers movie. But I think this is how Hulk should be, how should I say this? Should be portrayed. It's so fascinating to me, like how they kind of nerfed him over the years. Like Hulk is the strongest there is, and Bruce Banner has this monster inside him, and Edward Norton learning how to he's in like Brazil or whatever, learning how to control his breath. Like he can't have sex because if his heart rate gets up, he can Hulk out. Him being put, sort of leaping out the helicopter, being pushed out the helicopter, if I remember. It's such an interesting movie, and you don't realize it's truly connected to the MCU until, like, honestly, the after credits scene, or actually even in the beginning credits, they sort of talk about Shield and whatnot. But I don't know. I'm lukewarm on the movie. It's not as rewatchable as it could be. But the end fight between him and Abomination is interesting. Of course, it's all in the darkness because of the CGI at the time, but it kind of holds up still. It's a very interesting movie. A lot of those characters do come back, 5, 8, 10 years down the road in the MCU and various other projects. So I'm glad Marvel hasn't forgotten about the movie because, I'm a big fan of when movies don't, I'm a big fan of movies when they don't ignore what happened. Every movie sometimes try to retcon the past because they don't like the outcome that the movie presented in theaters. Star Wars is a big example of that, and I could do a whole video on Star Wars and the movies and the shows. And oh man, that's kicking a hornet's nest, and I don't know if I'm ready for that. So I will put the Incredible Hulk. My gut's saying C tier. Like it's pretty average. It doesn't. It came out after the first Iron Man, right? If I remember correctly, but it doesn't set like it's not the gold standard. Other superhero movies are kind of the gold standard, like Superman, Christopher Reeve's original Superman, original 1989 Batman. I think in the contemporary age, I would say besides Blade and besides even the X Men movies, I think Spider Man One just is the template for the rest of these modern superhero movies because yes, it borrows from all those other movies, the earnestness of the Reeve version, Sam Raimi's like 80s, 90s horror aesthetic, the way he does the camera, like his sensibilities to that movie. That is the gold standard. Incredible Hulk is like, okay, C tier. I don't want to say D tier because I don't want to be rude, but like it's I mean, for 10 plus years, I mean, it kind of gets lost in the mud. So let's just go C tier and just, if I change your mind, sure. But it's definitely C tier. Uh, and C tier is pretty middle of the road. I could rewatch it. I could not. I'm okay. Pretty much D, E, F is like, I've seen it once. I'll never see it again. C, yeah, let's say that. C is like, if it's on TV in the middle of it and I've got an hour to, fine, I'll finish the last hour, the last 30 minutes. But if it's from the start, I'm not going to sit and watch it. Like you'll skip over it if we go with the old TV rules, because when I was growing up, we really had to flip the channels. So I'm gonna go see. Like if it's at the point where he's hulking out at the college campus, maybe I'll watch the next 30 minutes and move on with my day. That's fine. Uh Iron Man 1, we're just gonna go S tier. I mean S and A, S and A is like minuscule, like, but what brings it the S is it started it off. I honestly don't think the CGI and practical effects have. I think it holds up really well, but I don't think any other movie or show really holds a candle to what they did in that first movie. That movie reeks blood, sweat, and tears, and then it reeks of like not, I shouldn't say reeks. That's negative connotation thinking about that, but it it's truly magnificent. I mean, I just remember watching that in theaters and him just embodying. Actually, I shouldn't say he was really embodying Tony Stark because Tony Stark in the comics in the show, he was kind of, yes, he's an asshole alcoholic, but he didn't have the suave nature that Robert Downey Jr. was portraying. Fellow Aries, mind you, I think our birthday is the same, April 4th. He doesn't, he didn't have that in the comics. He was just like, he was a smart guy like Reed Richards, and yeah, he had some of his suave nature, but this movie, like, it shot Iron Man, of course, from a C-list hero to A tier, and my God, it's untouchable. You can watch it from beginning to end, and if it was a standalone movie, didn't have a sequel, if you knew nothing about Marvel, I mean, it perfect. It works. It is solid storytelling, and even when you learn the behind the scenes nature of it, that they were sort of just writing it as they went. It's nuts. Like it just shit like that doesn't just happen. So, I mean, the one thing it did birth or brought resurgent is the doppelganger fight in the end that a lot of these movies have. Like the hero and villain have similar powers. I know it's they're supposed to be mirror images of each other. Tony and Obadiah Stane, like he has a robot suit, exoskeleton. Tony has one. They're fighting in LA, yada, yada, yada. Okay. In hindsight, it kind of dings it, but I can't in good conscience put it anything below just because without this, the rest of this bull crap doesn't exist. I mean, I was watched it in theaters and didn't even stay for the post credit scene because you never knew you had to do that. I remember going on the forums and learning about, oh, there was an after credit scene with Sam Jackson as Nick Fury. Like what? So Iron Man 1 can't beat it. Now Iron Man 2. Uh, now I'm gonna put it in C tier for now. There are moments in the movie that I really enjoy. A lot of the character moments, and honestly, one of my favorite moments is when Tony is looking at the archival footage of his dad. I think it's such a beautiful scene. Um, I can't imagine what it's like to be told via archival footage that your dad actually does care about you, because Tony Stark as a character went his whole life believing his dad didn't even think that much of him. And to know that his dad had such trust in him to not only finish the technology his dad started, but to improve on it and to honestly be a better person than him, it sets the foundation for the end game conversation with his father. And that's one of the reasons I enjoy it. Villain wise, Mickey Rourke, I mean, Whiplash. I mean, Iron Man's rogues are really stupid. I mean, the whole Armor War story arc, it's kind of like, all right, of course, yeah, every villain has a certain one of his armors, for a billionaire genius. He really can't lock his shit down, can he? But it tries to do the demon in bottle, doesn't get there. Uh, it's the beginning stages of Marvel saying, like, all right, we made a lot of money with this bad boy. Let's capitalize on it. But they just couldn't. It's like they made a perfect cake in the first one, almost accidentally. And then they tried to do it on purpose and it just doesn't turn out right. But the charisma of Robert Downey Jr. and the cast is through the charts, or through the roof, or I should say off the charts, right? I think it's amazing. So I'm gonna put it C tier again. If it's on at the scene where, eh, okay, so after the party, him and Rhodes get into their fight. Okay, I'll watch the next 20, 30 minutes. Now, the Mickey Rourke aspect, the bird thing, it makes no sense. And this movie does have a special place in my heart because this is the last movie I saw before I went to boot camp. So I was in boot camp, honestly, thinking about that movie while we were, I want to say getting tortured. That's a little much, but like it, wasn't having a great time all the time. And this is one of the movies I was thinking about, like, man, I can't wait to see where they go next. And honestly, I know a lot of people think, like, what would you do? Which superpower would you want? There's a lot of superpowers I would want, but to have the ability to call an Iron Man suit to me at any point, I think is pretty badass. So I'm gonna put that at C tier. Thor. Okay. Now this one, oh brother. Oh, what do I do with this one? I would say B tier or C tier. Now B tier because Thor has always been one of my secret favorites, just because I love Mjolnir. I like the idea of Greek gods and Norse gods and all that other stuff. Now, this movie is the most Shakespearean of the Thor movies, but I mean, the acting is top tier. And it's hard because, like, Marvel was in its C tier era up until this point. They were just trying to get these characters out so that you can know who they are for the Avengers. They were still figuring it out. And in hindsight, I give them such a pass for that because the fact that they got to a Thor movie, I mean, Thor is pretty like a ridiculous character to say, okay, all these other characters in the Marvel universe, they're mutants, they're Inhumans, they're this, they're that. But Greek, Norse gods actually exist. And you're like, okay, sure. Now I say B tier because I mean, the scene with like Anthony Hopkins and Thor and Loki, just titan of a scene of Odin stripping Thor of his power, and if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. I mean, just that whole thing just it pays off in movies down the line, which is amazing. But again, C tier because he's walking around, he's not the funny Thor yet, but it's it's low key kind of boring. I mean, it's just set up, and it's like they haven't unlocked Thor just yet. It's getting there. Tom Hiddleston is amazing in the movie, but at this point, it could have went anywhere. And I'm kind of surprised at myself so far. We're doing all the C tiers, but I'm just going in order. Now, Captain America. All right. Now, this is where I show my true colors. Uh, B tier. Why? It's a cheap B movie feel. Period piece. 1940s Captain America. Uh, my my dark black humor brain would have it would have been interesting in an alternate universe if if Steve Rogers was racist because he's in the 1940s. I mean, I've seen like parody videos on YouTube about that, and I kind of find it hilarious that he's not. But if I were to, not every single white person in the 40s was a racist piece of crap, of course. But like, I think it's such an interesting movie. And I give superheroes movies a certain pass because the first movie is like, all right, if it's good enough to get a sequel, they can always improve on it in its sequel. And honey, they improve on the sequel. Like every movie should get better than the last. And a lot of, especially threequels, they kind of fumbled the bag in the end. And Captain America: First Avenger sets the tone of the movie of his series. Like, okay, Steve Rogers is such a likable protagonist. Chris Evans plays him beautifully. He plays him with more vulnerability than the comic book version of Captain America and the cartoon versions I've watched over the years, who really is a square, America's top cop. They don't play him like that. They play him like a regular human who is just good. I mean, you've got the scene where he leaps on the grenade. You've got, him reacting to Bucky dying and he can't get drunk. I mean, him sacrificing himself in the end, that of course pays off. I mean, they haven't forgotten about this movie. And Red Skull, I mean, Nazi, like, I mean, what more is there to say? This movie has a lot of strings that just sort of pay off the rest of these shows and movies. I mean, Captain America's through line, Red Skull popping back up, Bucky's, starting his arc. I mean, you don't realize when you watch the movie that, oh yeah, Bucky was experimented on in that movie too, which lays a foundation for arguably the best Captain America and or superhero movie of 2014 and the 21st century. So B tier. I mean, of course, the ending. I mean, I told you in the beginning, I'm a sucker for good character moments. And one of the best character moments in this movie is the end where he's not even shocked he woke up in the future after he sacrificed himself. The last line of the movie is, "I had a date." He was thinking about Peggy, the love of his life. Like, oh my God. He didn't even ask, did we win? He don't give a shit about that. He's like, man, I had a date. And it's so human. And it's like, wow, okay. If they keep this going, they'll unlock something there. All right. Avengers 1. I want to say A tier because it was the first Avengers movie, but it's not my favorite Avengers movie. And that is where I'm struggling here because there's so many of these freaking things. It's like, what the heck do I do? Excuse me. And maybe some of you are thinking, when the hell is he going to put some D, E, or F? I would have put that one in F tier, E tier. Like maybe you would have, but this one's mine. Oh, life. Jesus. I could probably edit that out. Yeah, I'll do that. Or do I keep it in there for authenticity? Maybe. You'll be surprised in the edit. You'll see when it's all said and done. Anywho, let's see here. Where was I? So Avengers. Fun fact, 2012 when this came out, I have rarely ever fallen asleep in the theater. Even if I'm tired, even if whatever, I watched the whole thing. Avengers Endgame and Infinity War came out, saw midnight shows, worked all day, worked out. I mean, 12 midnight, I was up. I was locked in, watched every single frame, didn't even yawn. I fell asleep, I shit you not, in the first Avengers movie. And it wasn't because it was boring. It was because I actually, maybe there was a part in there that my brain shut off. And that was actually one of the moments I thought, oh, is superhero movies not for me anymore? Because mind you, I went to the theater to see every one of these minus Incredible Hulk. And I'm, reading interviews, was listening to videos online, early YouTube, videos about this movie, and I finally get a chance to see it. It was like 7, 8 p.m. And the scene I fell asleep on was right after the argument scene when the helicarrier is getting attacked by a brainwashed Hawkeye. And it was the scene where they're fixing the helicarrier. And then I kind of just zoned out. And I think the reason is I was such on a high that I kind of finally crashed. But the scene of Captain America and Iron Man fixing a helicarrier is boring. Like I woke up and Phil Coulson was sort of stabbed already, and Nick Fury was giving a speech with the cards, and I'm like, what the fuck happened? And it was a packed theater, and I remember sitting on the edge, and my friends probably were laughing because nobody woke me up, and I don't really snore and like that. I mean, a little bit, but yeah, I remember sleeping, and I thought, man, is superhero movies cooked for me? I'm at the Avengers movie, and I've fell asleep, and I think it's because I think it was dragging on because Loki came back and it was this whole thing gathering the team together. It had so many great character moments. Character moment wise, I mean, the meeting between Bruce Banner and Natasha, like I was tense. I felt tense, like him pretending to Hulk out, like, yelling at her, but then being calm. Like, oh, like that's how you do it. Like Bruce Banner is on edge. And I loved how Mark Ruffalo played him. I loved the argument scene when I was watched it. And then on the rewatches, I mean, Tony suiting up in his Mark 7, the whole circle shot. I mean, legit. Once I remember Nick Fury throwing the Captain America collector's cards on the table, I woke up and then I was like, oh, fuck, what did I miss? I was locked in since then. And then on subsequent rewatches, it wasn't so bad. But like after the argument scene, you're kind of like, what's happening? Hulk is fighting Thor and they're all kind of scattered and it's a lull. And the movie looks very shiny too, very Joss Whedon comic booky, I guess at the time, at the time he was like, oh my God, the dude. So, and it's A tier because A for Avengers, and it is a near perfect team up movie. That was the movie again where I was starting to look at Thor in a different light. Like, okay, he's kind of funny. Like the whole he's adopted line. I mean, Nick Fury and Natasha's interrogation of their separate interrogations of Loki, really great. Captain America, like the suit's a little goofy, but I kind of like it. I mean, it was trying to be a real comic book movie before people wanted to get all serious and we got to take it even serious. I'm like, there's a flying god and 2 assassins that Hawkeye shoots bows. Like, what are we doing? Who gives a crap? And then, of course, that movie kind of spawned or reignited the sky beam trope where monsters come out from the sky and it's just like whatever. Post-credit scene, the Thanos thing, I don't think I stayed for that one. Or did I? I can't remember. Either way, I honestly wasn't looking forward to Thanos at that point. I was still trying to like, okay, cool. But who are they going to fight next? Who knows? All right. Next up, okay. I'm not trying to be biased here, but Iron Man 3 is between A tier and S tier, and I'll tell you why. A good post-traumatic stress story, I'm all in. And the fact that it's Iron Man, the quote-unquote human character on the team, I'm all in. The trailer, badass. The story, so-so, but I mean, again, good character. Like the fact that he would have PTSD, he now realizes aliens exist. Like if you look at the timeline of the Avengers, the timeline of that movie is like 2-3 days. Iron Man is Iron Manning. He gets a visit from Phil Coulson, and then shit pops off. He learns within 2 days. In those 2 days, Captain America's back, Hulk, Thor, aliens, Chitauri. Who are these people? I got to team up. Does all that. And Avengers ends with him and Pepper in Avengers Tower, like, oh, or soon to be Avengers Tower, saying, okay, yeah, we're going to have this team. It gives you hope. Then the next movie in the franchise, Iron Man 3. I mean, even the poster, his suit's ruined. Like something's going down. Like he's going through post-traumatic. And that stress of this movie, they really complement each other. influences the rest of these films, especially in the Captain America and Avengers movies. The stress of the first Avengers movie and what he went through with Pepper almost dying, him trashing his suits, is good. Villain Mandarin wise, the whole fire powers, sure, whatever, don't care. But good character. Now, the one gripe I have about the movie is him taking out the arc reactor. I get it. At that point, they had to have been thinking to themselves, this guy invented 42 suits that can fly on their own and go Mach 5 and do all this crap, but he can't get his heart fixed. And so they fixed it. And then it's sort of like, all right, the suits have the arc reactor now. He no longer needs it. And I get thematically, I get why. But I think him having that in his chest, like he could do all these things. He's so smart. He can build this. He's the mechanic, yada, yada, yada. But he can't fix his heart. I think it's very thematically interesting. Like a guy who was an arms dealer, a weapons manufacturer, who was okay with people getting murdered by his weapons, who had a black heart. I feel like him keeping that in his chest is very thematic, very interesting. And if he doesn't have that, it kind of goes, okay, well, why are you still Iron Man then? Because we have like 4 other Avengers movies you got. We have several team ups. Like if you're no longer Iron Man, then what are we doing? And I think that's what brings it down from S to this one. Because it's supposed to be the trilogy. It's like, well, I'm closing out an Iron Man story. And it ends like, I am Iron Man even if I don't have my suits. Like, no, motherfucker, you're still Iron Man and we need you in those suits because it's 2013 and in 2 years from now, you're going to sign to Disney and we need more merch. So, but nah, I mean, just the idea of his Mark 42 suit, you know, I love the idea that he was so, I don't want to say broken, but he was so changed by the events of the first Avengers movie that he just goes, you know, I'm building 42 suits. I can't sleep. You know, uh, my girlfriend Pepper, you know, she's feeling the distance from me. And it was interesting. I thought it was cool. The whole little kid thing I could have done without, but I guess what do they say, from the mouth of babes? You know, he finally gets the clarity. You know, the little boy subplot. Shane Black, cool director. I mean, cool writer as well. So yeah, Iron Man 3. I think these two complement each other. Thor: The Dark World. D. Didn't like it when it came out. I didn't fall asleep in the theaters, but was bored. Again, they at this point we're like, all right, we need to start building to some Infinity Stone bull crap because we're almost near Avengers and where are we going? They've almost figured out Thor, but not quite yet. The action scenes, they realized the first Thor movie didn't have a lot of action scenes. Let's put a lot more action in this one. And then forgettable villain, forgettable stuff. Cast is still being wacky, whatever, doesn't matter. Moving on. Thor: The Dark World. Yeah, let's get to the fun stuff. Okay, let's just go ahead and put Winter Soldier at S tier. Talk about the best movie experience of 2014. And I can't remember what else came out 2014, but I remember not just the elevator scene in Winter Soldier, the scene where he beats, where it's not actually, it's after the elevator scene, legit after he leaps out of the elevator and takes down a shield jet. And then I'm like, this movie is saying Captain America ain't no punk. I mean, he never was, but like, if you watch what he was like in the first Avengers, in the first Avenger, and in the first Avengers movie, he fights bare knuckle boxer style. But when you see him on the ship, the Lumerian Star, and he's taking on Batroc the Leaper, played by that was it, Jean Pierre, if I'm correct. I mean, I'm like, oh, okay, in these 2 years he learned martial arts. They're saying Captain America is no sucker. Like the way he's not like, I want to say like he's not anyone that you shouldn't like. I'm speechless thinking about. I'm just remembering that movie, watching it, and I'm like, holy moly! You've got the way he throws a shield, not just as a defensive weapon, but an offensive weapon. the way he's sort of figuring out who the heck am I in this new world. He meets Sam Wilson. The whole Winter Soldier plot line with Bucky coming back, his relationship with Natasha, where it's sort of my headcanon is their work wife, work husband in a way. Like, yeah, there could be romantic feelings, but I think at that point they just didn't know what they were doing. I think they were trying to like not dive into the trope, which I really applaud that the male protagonist and the female protagonist have to get together. They have to kiss. I like how they went away from that. But it's just like, yeah, we're just good colleagues and great friends that, of course, pay off because Steve is pretty altruistic. Like he's a decent guy, the best guy. He's worthy, some would say. But Winter Soldier is just the gold standard of a superhero sequel, where it elevates from one to the second one, and it goes, you know what? Whatever worked in the first one, let's add it, but let's do something different. I mean, it almost could go to A tier if it wasn't so perfect. I mean, that's just it is. And this year was the 10-year anniversary of it coming out, so it makes sense. But it is truly a perfect movie when it comes to superhero fanfare and a perfect sequel. It delivers on all accounts, and it's only gotten better. I mean, when I first saw it, I was like, okay, but then every we watch, it just goes right to the top. And I love it. I think, honestly, Captain America, it just really impresses me what they've done to make such a square character, honestly, one of the most fanned over characters in the last 10 years. Like, it doesn't happen. But I could talk about that all day. Guardians Galaxy, um, again, emotional character beats. Well, again, before I even let me go back, the character beats. I mean, him and Peggy. I mean, just him and Sam. Oh, before I even get to Guardians, let's go real quick. The Sam Wilson aspect of it, the fact that Steve meets this fellow vet and they bond, which I think is pretty dope. They make Falcon an interesting character instead of a guy who has red wings and talks to birds. The fact that they made Falcon a veteran counselor, and that Steve, because of respect for Sam, takes up that same profession in Endgame because he wants to give back, and he learned that from Sam in this movie, like doing what you can, and it sets up, of course, more to follow in those storylines. But I think it's cool. Guardians, now B tier, A tier, hard to say. I would say I love a good space movie. I love a good space show, space video game, all that. I've never heard of the Guardians before this movie. I'm okay to admit that. I'm not saying I read every comic and it's there. Like, I didn't know, didn't care. But when I saw it in theaters, I was like, okay, we getting somewhere. Great emotional story. I could watch it. I could watch it from beginning to end, but if it's on at the part after when they're in nowhere onward, I'd watch the rest. I mean, and that's sort of how I feel about this tier. Again, this tier, if at a certain part I'll watch the next 30 minutes, but then I'll be like, all right, I'm gone. This I'll watch maybe from one point to the next point all the way through if I have the time. This one is like start to finish, no matter what. S is don't say less. It's on in the background. I'm still on. It's just comfort, very comfort watch. But yeah, Guardians. The cast is cool. I'm kind of one of those, like, the Guardians gotten better as you have seen them, but in a way also less is more with me. And that's why I don't have a lot to say. I just like the ending more than anything. So that's why I fluctuate actually between B and C tier, because I don't, again, people are going to be like, oh, you don't love all of Guardians. I'm like, honestly, it's never been my favorite. Um, you know what? I'm going to put it at C. I'm sorry. It's at C. I can't pretend otherwise. It's I'd be lying if I said, because there's other two Guardians movies that I love more. So I gotta be fair. Next up, Avengers: Age of Ultron. So initially, I say B. Now this is the movie where Marvel got drunk off the wine, smoked all the crack. They can afford the top tier Hollywood cocaine because they said we have look at what we've done so far. We're gonna have a movie with so many characters, so much bull crap going on. You won't even know what to think when you're watching this thing. We're gonna be so funny. No one's gonna take anything seriously. And this is why this movie, after the first watch, when I first watched it, I was A. I was like, finally, another Avengers movie, cool. And then the next rewatch, B. And then some of the clips I saw, I was like, what? What? Actually, this movie doesn't hold up as well as I thought. And then, all the YouTube videos I've heard or podcasts I've listened to, it just keeps bringing it down. But then as I thought more about it, it's a solid B. And it's a B because at a certain point, I can watch the rest of it. Actually, no, I can't. It's a C. And it's not any one character's individual fault as to why this movie doesn't work. It's just too much happening. They thought bigger meant better. Ultron, I think, is always has been one of my favorite Marvel villains. I love anything dealing with AI as a villain because, excuse me, it's an endless well, to be honest. You can do a lot with that. And so you have Ultron, who was created by Tony as this computer AI program who, the moment he's born, along with integrating Jarvis and the Mind Stone into himself and Infinity Stone crap, is truly a threat. And what he does in this movie definitely has ramifications for the rest. It's just that if the movie was better, I would hold those ramifications as a higher, like it would weigh more, but it just doesn't. I love the ending scene between him and Vision, Ultron and Vision, about humanity. The initial rift between the Avengers starts here. Cap and Steve sort of, you know, actually have one verbal sparring match and one physical match, like setting the seeds for Civil War. Like this whole movie is just, again, setup. And at a certain point, I can watch it in 30-minute chunks or clips on YouTube and I'll be fine. And the title Age of Ultron just doesn't, it was like a week. Like it's just not, it's just, it wasn't it as much as I would loved it to be. Ant-Man, man, it's not a D tier, but these movies I don't watch again. Like Lewis is funny in the movie. Him beating up Falcon really pissed me off, and it still does because he's Ant-Man. He doesn't have his giant man powers yet. He just learned how to use his abilities, and he's going to break into the Avengers mansion, mind you. Mind you, the Avengers haven't even broken up yet. They're still at full power. And then Ant-Man beats up Falcon in a cameo appearance it's a heist movie, sure, but the technology is cool, but nah, it's D tier. Like it's not as, no, I can't put it here. Because it's not on the same level of Thor: The Dark World. You know what? But that means Thor: The Dark World has to go to E and Ant-Man has to go to D. I think that's fair. Because Ant-Man is watchable. Thor: The Dark World is borderline like, why am I watching this crap? Yes, some things in Thor: The Dark World pay off in better movies, but like that is that. What are we gonna do with that? Like, what if I always think, what if I died after seeing Thor: The Dark World? I would have never known it could have gotten better. Maybe that's how I should start saying this. If I had died after any of these movies, like my last movie thought would have been, so that's how Thor is. Like, nah, that's not great. Okay. Civil War. All right. Avengers 2.5, they call it. I still call it Civil War because this is the time where, like, it's kind of hard to do a movie with individual threats between each one of these main characters and the Avengers don't pop up. And that is one of my gripes. Again, back to Thor the Dark World. All this wacky shit's happening in London and none of the Avengers goes to help. Iron Man 3 can be excused about that because he is the main Avenger, but also, no, again, if I have to wait, it's just a better movie than Thor. So that's why it stays up here. But and it actually talks about something really interesting, PTSD in the superhero community. But Civil War, it's just it's what Avengers 2 thematically or story wise or narrative wise could have been. A movie that had ramifications but took itself a little more seriously. And this was also the same year, of course, BVS came out, not in Batman versus Superman. And I'm not talking about the extended edition. I'm talking about the theatrical cut, which that movie is horrible. I don't like it. And not because everybody acted horribly in it. It's just story wise, it doesn't make sense. Like acting is, I try not to judge the acting as much because I'm not an actor. Who am I to say? But also, it's just certain things like work and certain things don't. This was like, okay, during that year, it worked. Two superheroes who, for the last 6-7 years at that time, we've grown fond of are now fighting. The reason why it's B tier is next to the original first Avengers. A lot of that stuff that's set up here kind of pays off in here. Peggy dies in this one. Bucky remembers who he is, but is on the run. It really leans into why Cap is the greatest Avenger and why his leadership matters and why he rides for his people. I mean, he breaks his people out of jail in the end. Just the ramifications. I mean, this is also Tony watching his parents die via video by the Winter Soldiers. Like, okay, holy shit. And Cap knew. He learned about that in Winter Soldier, and I'm pretty sure he learned even more about it and just kept it to himself. Means he's just like us. He does lie. And one of my favorite things about the movie, and I don't see a lot of people talk about this, is when Sam Wilson is captured and he goes and Tony Stark's talking to him, that there's a Mark Furman joke in the movie. And like, it goes over a lot of people's heads, it seems like, but like, people talk about race is never really brought up in these Marvel movies. Sam Wilson makes a Mark Furman joke. He says, in order for Iron Man to get any information out of him, Iron Man, white guy, must go Mark Furman, aka one of the cops who, during the O.J. Simpson trial, testified about his racist past, and evidence was brought forth in what they called the Furman tapes, in which he had a racist tirade in the 90s, mind you. Part of the reasons of the giant, was it the LA riots? He says that in this movie. This movie was written by a couple of white guys, Marcus and McFeely, and directed by the Russo brothers. Now, was that line ad-libbed by Mackie? And if it was, during this time, Marvel was already bought by Disney, and they had a lot of takes, and Disney okayed it. Kevin Feige okayed it. And I'm just like, okay, these movies can get topical if they want to. Mind you, these are kids' movies in a way, right? It's like, what the fuck? And I love it. Like, okay, the one besides Don Cheadle, Anthony Mackie has a Mark Furman joke. Like, you're going to have to go Mark Furman on my ass to get anything out of him. So in the Marvel universe, Rodney King exists. Okay? Rodney King, Mark Furman, all of that happened. Like, Google that. Like, look up what happened if you don't know. Please, you should know. But like, really, like, think about that. Just like, okay, if in Captain America Hitler exists and the KKK presumably exists, Then it leads all the way back. Another connection. Mark Furman by Anthony Mackie's Falcon says that while he's in prison for going against the government based off some bullshit reasons. So again, B tier. I just think it's hilarious. So, oh man, how much time am I? I feel like I'm going long, but it's just so much to talk about in these movies. Maybe I'll do 2 parts to this. I don't know, but I just think Civil War is great. I mean, it just sets up a lot and ends a lot of storylines at the same time. Um, I didn't talk a lot about Wanda or Vision and her powers and all of that and the whole, because, based off the comic storyline, superhero registration. And they sort of leaned into that in the Sokovia Accords, but like they didn't have enough superheroes on the board to really do a Civil War storyline. So I was one of those people who are like, we're doing Civil War already? Like we don't have, at the time, we didn't think we had Spider-Man. We don't even have mutants. We don't have the Fantastic Four. Like there's only 15 superheroes. Like you guys are fighting already. Like you just started. And one of the gripes that where it's not A and S tiers, Nick Fury's not in it. And I know Sam Jackson has said this in person as well. And I've always agreed during this time. Your children are fighting the Avengers and your dad, Nick Fury, is not around to even have any words of wisdom. Like he had words of wisdom in Age of Ultron. He was in the first Avengers movie. Like, what was he doing? Especially when you know that, spoiler alert for in the future, he has Skrulls like impersonate him at certain times. Like he couldn't just show up and say, I mean, I'm sure he would talk to Tony, he would talk to Steve or Nat or somebody and be like, what's happening? Like his name is never brought up. And it always bugged me. And I guess that's another reason that B. And I think we're still in phase 3. So Doctor Strange, C tier. I never was the huge Doctor Strange fan. Honestly, if I didn't watch it again, I'd be all right. But like, I like the scene with him and the Ancient One in their final conversation. I didn't care about the controversy of Tilda Swinton, being casted in that role. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm allowed to be offended by it, but I can understand why people in a community would be like, hey, that should have gone to a potential Asian actor to portray the Ancient One, because historically that's what it was in the comics, but also in the comics was also very racist too. That's one of the reasons Iron Man hasn't fought Fu Manchu. Like it's kind of tough. So yeah, Doctor Strange. It's like honestly, it's more D tier. Doctor Strange has been better in other stuff than his own movie. And the first movie is supposed to set the tone for his character. And like, okay, whatever didn't work in the first, let's work it out in the second or the third or whatever. Yeah, I'm gonna say D. It's like Ant-Man. Like I never need to watch it again. And that's kind of sad. I love rewatching stuff. So Guardians of the Galaxy 2, B tier. I'm a sucker for movies between parents and children, and this is all of that. And I mean, the last funeral scene is a tearjerker. Peter Quill meeting his dad, the whole celestial thing. It's a one-off movie because not a lot of it really has a lot of ramifications. Maybe the Nebula and Gamora relationship, but it's kind of a one-off in a way, and I think that's interesting. Very emotional movie. I do fluctuate between C tier and B tier because it is rewatchable. But to be honest, I mean, it's an awesome soundtrack. Like I'm thinking about this really in real time. I would say C for now because Guardians 3 just is somewhere up here. I just think they've been better in other stuff. But man, it was an emotional movie. So that's why I'm kind of fluctuating. I'm going to say here for now. I'll probably change my mind later, but whatever. It doesn't matter. Okay, Spider-Man. MCU Spider-Man Homecoming. Okay. Now, this is where I'm really going to change it. Guardians goes up to B because it's a super emotional movie for me specifically. Spider-Man Homecoming. The poster looks god awful. Can't believe they did that crap. God, modern movie posters suck today, don't they? Just not great. Just honestly look at them. Like this one's okay, tells a story, but the rest of them is like truly just like some Photoshop garbage. This is just like when it really went off the fucking rails. But Spider-Man Homecoming, I could do a whole rant about my opinions and feelings on Spider-Man Homecoming. So, or just Spider-Man and MCU. And it bleeds into real life where watching the original Tobey Maguire movies was something special. It was magical. Like I felt like you really feel like these people are acting their ass off. They're treating this like Shakespeare. The Andrew Garfield ones, and even then they make fun of that in MCU in No Way Home. Like everyone understands the Andrew one he's Peter 3, right? But the Tobey ones are just like earnest and heartfelt, and truly you feel like Spider-Man is up against it. And Spider-Man Homecoming, there are some moments in there, but I just don't like Spider-Man having all that technology in his suit. It really makes me feel like Peter Parker in MCU is an idiot. Not idiot's pretty strong, but he feels like he doesn't do anything on his own. And I can't get with that. I really can't. And I've tried. And there are parts of this movie I really enjoy, but it's kind of boring. The Vulture stuff is interesting. The rescue in Washington, D.C., I like the idea that he's scared of heights at first, that he's trying to be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. We don't get the Uncle Ben story. It's sort of kind of told in Civil War. I mean, I didn't really mention a lot about Spider-Man in Civil War because it's sort of, he's sort of like an afterthought, but that sort of worked out when they rushed him in there. But he gets his full movie. I mean, Tom Holland plays him amazingly, the teenager kid version. But I think the issue with Hollywood and superhero storytelling is they are afraid of letting characters grow up, and specifically Spider-Man. And this is something I've always felt like a piece of media that I felt connected to with Spider-Man is the 90s Spider-Man TV show. And I would say that was my intro into the character along with comics and video games, but the 90s animated Spider-Man show handles Peter Parker in such a way that you not only feel for him that things aren't going as well his way and you believe it, but you also really appreciate what it means for Spider-Man to be a superhero. The fact that in that show, he goes through all his classic storylines. I mean, the Venom storyline in that show really hasn't been topped since in any other real media. We're always trying to chase that, in my opinion, that animated Spider-Man high. And what also made it interesting is that Peter Parker was not in high school. He was in college going through all that. And you really feel like that Spider-Man was just getting shit on in every episode, left and right. And he had to find a reason to be Spider-Man. And in that show, he rarely punched people because they wouldn't allow punching like that in certain kids' shows. So he always uses webs to throw people around. If you ever look back, think about that. You'll be like, oh, snap. He never punches anyone. But my point is that I feel like the Tom Holland movies, they stick to this Peter Parker's, his best storyline is when he's in high school. That's when you feel like the weight of the world's on his shoulders. He's a kid. I feel like that's Hollywood, especially Hollywood white men feeling like they have to keep reliving their childhood. Like it's always got to be the 80s. It's always got to be the 70s. It's always got to be the early 90s. Like it was the best time ever. And Peter Parker has been out of high school since the 60s. And yet the only time they feel like they can tell a gratifying Spider-Man story is when he's in high school. And it comes off to me a little weird. And Spider-Man has been such a hero where he doesn't need to be on any team. He doesn't need to look up to Tony Stark, or granted, yeah, when he first started out, he tried to join the Fantastic Four. Yeah, but I kind of give that a pass because the comics just started then. Like it was just something to write about. But majority of his storylines, his best storylines, he doesn't team up. He really doesn't. He handles them on his own. Every other superhero just kind of says, whatever Spidey's going through, we don't give a shit. Who cares if he's poor? I think that the first Homecoming movie had a lot of good stuff. I mean, the whole MJ thing, he barely had a relationship with her in the movie. But in the last movie, we're supposed to believe that like they're so madly in love that he's willing to give up everyone's memory of him to make sure they're safe. And the first movie was supposed to establish that. And the first Tobey Maguire establishes that him and MJ, like he loves that girl. And this one is kind of interesting. Like it has interesting parts. The Tony Stark aspect, I felt like they shoehorned him in. But again, it was the first movie of the new franchise, and I was willing to give it a pass and see, okay, where do they go from here? Maybe it will get better. Does it? I feel like they just don't realize the power Spider-Man has, that he can carry a movie on his own without anyone else. Like when we get to the second movie, he doesn't need Nick Fury there. When we get to the third movie, Spider-Man doesn't need to have other two Spider-Men from another universe there. Like he is the character that was carrying the movies on his back before any of these other people were allowed to do it. Like I feel like Homecoming doesn't put a lot of respect on his name. He has the AI in his suit. He's not, it could have been a little better in hindsight. I love the scene and what makes it at sea is I love the scene where he has the rubble on him and he's calling for help like a kid would. Like, I need help. Help me. And is anybody there? And then he has to dig deep and save the day, of course. But I think in hindsight, it sort of ruins it where he gets his high-tech his suit back and Aunt May knows his identity. Granted, they don't want all those same tropes, but I just feel like he wasn't struggling enough. I mean, the relationship between him and Vulture was interesting. They dropped a sort of supervillain Scorpion thing. I'm starting to ramble now. It just didn't hit. Ragnarok. They unlocked Thor in a very comedic way in this one, which I enjoy. And I love what they kind of did with Hulk. They answered some storylines in there. I just think it's a fun movie. Like Hela, Hulk, Thor, Valkyrie. I think it's a fun, colorful movie where they say, you know what, let's make Thor funny. He's funny. Chris Hemsworth's funny. But that's all it has. And so I struggle between B and C tier. But I also feel like they did not. I also feel like they did not follow through with the potential of what Thor could be after this movie, because they sort of retconned the fact that his power was always needed by the axe by the time he gets to Infinity War, because now he needs Stormbreaker. Him getting his hammer destroyed and him going to another planet and learning, what it means to be a hero again in a way, is interesting. And it's a fun comedy. And that's why I'm not thinking of a super movie. It's a fun comedy. And it leading into Infinity War, the end credits is good. I mean, I've rarely talked about Loki in this one. I kind of feel like Loki's been done so much to death. I think Hela as a villain is pretty cool, which is why I'm going to keep it at B. What else about it? I think that's about it. I mean, the scene between Odin, Thor, and Loki when Odin is finally dying, I really love. Again, good character moments really carry this tier for me. Next one. Here we go. This is where my heart and mind struggle, because Black Panther is just, it's not a masterpiece, but highly rewatchable. The only thing that pisses me off about the movie is the end CGI fight. And I wish, if the movie really should have been 3 hours long, if Oppenheimer can be 3 hours, Black Panther should have been 3 hours. The biggest thing is they didn't give, okay, Lion King. Scar takes over the Pride Lands, and you see how horrible the Pride Lands are due to his rule. It's a wasteland. Same sort of premise in a way of Black Panther, right? T'Challa's killed. Killmonger takes over. Wakanda has to do what he says. Killmonger wants to oppress all the black people of the world. Great, we're on board, buddy. It's hard to not be on the villain side in this one. But the moment he reveals his plan, the next moment you learn T'Challa's alive. I feel like we needed another 30 minutes to an hour to see what the world is like under Killmonger's rule, to really see the stakes of like what happens with, even if we agree with him, what can happen. Like there could have been some scenes of him testing out arming oppressors over the world and people running rampant with power because that's what happens. Or more so the, not so much a rebellion between, Wakanda and him, but like what do other Wakandans think of what just happened? Can you imagine living in a random street in Wakanda? You weren't even allowed to go to the tournament, to the fight to determine who's king. I mean, you just were at one, and next you read on the news like, oh, there's also another king now who wants to do what? Like, I want to know. I want to know what their opinions are. I know they're not a hive mind. What's his name? What's his character? I don't want to say Harabi, but that's not it. Daniel Kaluuya's character, he was all on board where Okoye was not. And I wanted to see more of that, but also, okay, yeah, they're bound by duty, but I want to see more of Killmonger's plan. What happens to Wakanda in his rule? Is it prospering? Is it failing? Or I think a little bit more of that. So that means when the final fight happens, we visually see the two sides other than just the fact that Killmonger is the bad guy in the movie, and the movie's called Black Panther. And of course, rest in peace to Chadwick. But that was one of my biggest gripes. Even when after I watched the movie, I was like, man, it's amazing that we finally get this. I'm so grateful. But also, why can't we see Killmonger like really rule? He's literally in charge for maybe a day and then he's deposed. And I kind of like, I wanted to see like 30 more minutes. Like, we needed 30 more minutes of that movie. Because once he's in charge, I would love to see like what's it like under Killmonger's rule. We already know what he feels about people talking back to him, or him holding the old lady by the neck and him burning all the heart shaped herbs. Like, we know what he would do, but I wanted to see it a little more in depth. That's my only gripe. And the CGI in the end. Everything else I think is great. It's just a tragedy what happened to Chadwick and his character storyline not finishing. And then that leads me into my thoughts of, should they have recasted? I don't mind recasting. A lot of movies recast, a lot of plays recast. I mean, think of any big Broadway play does not have the same cast in it because people want to do other things. They want to move on. And it's unfair to have those same expectations. Because he played the character so iconically, yes, but so did Christopher Reeve. And we've had at least 6 to 8 different live action Supermans, animated Supermans. And that's one thing, like, I don't want us to hold a character as, let's say black people or people of color or whatever, so precious that we never want to see nobody else play them. It takes sort of food out of somebody else's mouth. Somebody else that could feed their family with a $10-20 million Marvel deal playing Black Panther. It really leads to the funny Blade and Deadpool and Wolverine joke of Blade saying there's never been only one Blade. Like, they just recast. It's okay. I'm a big fan of recasting. Art is not so precious that you cannot recast and to make it better. It doesn't work like that. Think about every Shakespeare play, every retelling of Romeo and Juliet. I'm not saying make remakes, but I'm like, if an actor passes away and the story can continue, yes, he will forever be our original Black Panther. But think about all the different storylines we could get with another actor of equal or more caliber skill as Chadwick had. The same thing with Spider-Man. I mean, I like Tom Holland's Spider-Man. He's not my favorite, but I mean, watching No Way Home was special because you're seeing not just corporate synergy, but just three actors who really at one point enjoyed playing that role, that it defined their life. It put so much money in their pocket. It fed their family. It gave them so many opportunities. And I think it's only fair that we get that as Black people in the entertainment industry. Like, come on, like, recast him. It's okay. No one is going to look at it like, how dare they? And if there is, it's a small percentage, because our goal is to tell a story. Not to saying the sequel they told wasn't, and when I get to there, I'll get to there, wasn't worth it. It's just, it needs to be said that it's okay to heal and to make money at the same time. Like, recast, it's okay. So yeah, Black Panther's A tier. Um, I think a natural way to stop is at Infinity War, and then I'll continue the other half soon. I just need to take a break. I've been talking a lot. That's why Nico likes to talk. So, Infinity War, S tier. S tier because it's the movie that literally they brought it all together. Not just Endgame, but like Infinity War is just, oh my goodness. I mean, I don't have no words. I mean, every positive feeling you have about a movie is in this movie. It is not even an Avengers movie. It's a Thanos movie, for one. He's the main character, and it follows all of Joseph Campbell's story beats. And that's why it's a good movie, because it doesn't really deviate. It's like, all right, character wants something. He goes to get it. He loses something to get it, comes back from getting that thing changed. Catharsis, done. Thanos' story. Carries all the same thematic baggage from all these other movies, especially the ones of consequence, into this. I know some people were like, well, the hero's going to come back. It doesn't matter. I don't feel anything. Yes, because we're an omniscient third party behind the fourth wall watching. We know how corporations work. Yes, the characters will come back. But if you take that part out of it and be a character in the movie, you don't know your friends or family or anybody else is coming back after getting snapped. You don't know that. And I love that thinking of it. I mean, at the time when this movie came out, I think a little bit after, I was watching the show called The Leftovers, about what happens when 1%, or was it 1 or 2% of the world's population just vanishes. And if you've seen that show on HBO, it's only 3 seasons. It's damn near, it's a perfect show. Shit just goes off the wall. Religious cults pop up. I mean, people are in constant state of grief. The end of this movie promised all that and more, and it was consequences of all the times every one of these characters succeeded. Arguably, they finally failed. And if these characters can fail at such a, I mean, such a how do I say it? If they can fail in such a magnitude, it just, how they're like, where do you go from there? And I remember leaving that movie and people were crying, like crying. I didn't cry till Endgame, but this, I was just in silence. I was like, they fucking did it. They left. The last time we saw these guys in an Avengers movie, it was some C tier, like whatever jokey villain. Thanos wasn't cracking no jokes. He was standing on business. And again, great character moments. You get the feeling that Thanos, oh yes, deep down or even on the surface, he enjoyed the bloodshed. But every time he killed, especially when he was fighting Thanos or even Gamora, it was like because he had to do it. He was driven by a sense of duty in his mind, and it made sense. I mean, there's so much to say about Infinity War that, there's hundreds of video essays on YouTube that can speak a lot more articulate than I can about this. Watch that, and whatever they say is essentially what I think and more. And what I'll do is I'll pause it here because I want to save the last batch for the other half of this, because because eventually we're getting into the TV show era, phase 4. And this is the era where apparently Marvel and some is kind of truth, went off the rails. And some would say either started at Endgame or it started at Ant-Man or Captain Marvel or all that stuff, whatever. And I've seen most of these. I haven't seen a few of these shows, but I'm going to end it here. And you'll check back with me soon. And I can't wait to read the comments and see what other people thought about this, because it's fun. And I haven't talked about this in depth about it before. And sorry, I'm not sorry. Sorry, not sorry. I may not sound as eloquent explaining my views, but these are just it. I'm just going off the dome here. It's whatever. But all right. I'll see you for part 2 when I post end game thoughts. And boy, do I got some.